Right. Okay. Thank you very much for coming to my talk. So the title of this talk is Examining Games and a Way to Repair Them. So this talk will be mostly high level, but sometimes I will go deeper. So apologies if it's too esoteric for some here. Okay, so the structure will be, there will be two parts. The first part is the examining part, and I will talk about correctness problem and tractability problem. And second part is repairing. Now we start with this question: how we define correctness in multi-agent systems. So classical notion of correctness in formal methods in formal verification, they ignore agent preferences. So they see system as like one big unit without any subunits or agents inside. So we need to, or we would like to define correctness with respect to rational choices of the agents. So each agent has some goals, gamma, psi, and so on and so forth. And we want to define correctness with respect to rational behavior of the agents. So why do we do so?
Yeah. When you say rational, you mean aligned with their goals?
Yes, they try to achieve their own goal. So for instance, we have some autonomous cars crossing some intersection. So we expect most of them, or maybe all of them, crossing without crashing to each other. Right? They don't want to crash to each other. But crossing and crashing is also a possible behavior of the system if we don't look at the rationality of the agents of the cars. So we would like to define correctness with respect to something else. That is, so we propose correctness with respect to stable behavior of the systems of the agents. And if we define correctness with respect to stable behaviors, one of the possible toolbox that we can use is game theory. So in game theory, there are many notions of equilibria, which means essentially it means that the system is considered to be stable. And in doing so, we turn multi-agent systems into multiplayer games. So we treat each agent as a player in this multiplayer game. So rational verification, the concept that we are proposing is verification with some flavor of game theory. In classical verification, in model checking, for instance, we have some model and we have some specification that we want to check whether it's satisfied in the system. And the model checker will output yes if the claim is true in the model, or no, and then it will give some counterexample. But in rational verification, we have rational model checker, and we take into the account player preferences. So we have one more input here, which is player preferences. And it outputs yes, the claim is true in maybe some equilibrium, or no, the query on the claim does not hold in any equilibrium. So the framework that we use here is a multiplayer game. So we have a game with
again,
yeah.
So, and what if there's no equilibrium?
That's what we want to check, right? We want to check whether,
And if you go to the previous slide, then
yes,
if there's no equilibrium, then any claim will always hold.
no,
Sorry.
But still exists in a way. In some equilibrium, so there should exist equilibrium.
I mean, if there exists equilibrium, then we want to know. So there's an existential problem there,
Yeah.
and also universal problem.
Yeah.
So if there exists, if equilibrium exists, then we can ask whether there exists some of the equilibria that satisfy the specification.
All right. Yeah.
Najib, sorry, for the recording's sake, could you switch on and off the camera on your laptop because it froze completely as I tried to zoom on you. It just shows an empty corner of the room. And now if you switch it on. It's okay, it's blank, but I think we'll have to leave with it.
Okay.
Don't let it distract you, fine.
Right, so the framework will be a game, and the players, each player we associate with some goal, gamma, I'd say. And the game is played over some graph arena. And in this game, each player will choose some strategy in order to achieve their goal. And we also have a temporal logic property, for instance, LTL phi, that we want to check within the game. To illustrate this, let's look at this example. So suppose we have two robots, robot A and B, and we have two locations, location 1 and 2. And suppose initially A is located at location 1 and B at 2. And in each day, so it's discretized by day. So in each day, each robot can either stay at current location or move to the other location. So we have this kind of graph arena here. So we have the initial state here, S1. So A1 means that A is at location 1, B2 means that B at location 2. And then at the next step, they can either A move to A to 2 and B stay at 2, for instance. So we move from here to here. And so each robot can move, like can stay and or move to the other one. And we end up with this graph arena. Now suppose that robot A is tasked to service location 1 and robot B service location 2 infinitely often. But there's a catch. In order to be able to carry out this task, both robots have to be at the same location. So they have to somehow do some task that needs their cooperation, for instance. So robot A goal is to service location 1 infinitely often. So it means that robot A wants to visit S4 infinitely often, because in state S4, both A and B are at location 1. And this corresponds to an LTL formula GFS4. So always, sometime in the future, S4 is visited. So we have the goal of robot A as GFS4. And likewise, we have the goal of robot B, GFS2, because in S2, both robots are at location 2. Now, the robot will try to achieve their goal. They will adopt some kind of strategy. So, for instance, we have this couple of strategies. So suppose robot A strategy is follows. So in day one, on day one, robot A moved to 2. And on day 2, moved to 1. Day 3, moved to 2. So oscillating between 1, 2. And robot B, on day 1, stay at 2. And then day 2, next day, move to 1. The next day, move to 2, and then oscillating, right? So we have this kind of trace. So day 0, the initial state, we have A1, B2. And the next day, we have A2, B2. Next day, A1, B1, and so on and so forth. So we have this kind of trace. So S1, S2, S4 to the omega. And this trace satisfies both robot goals, right? So strategies can be seen as a function, abstractly, mathematical, a function that maps from history of the play to some action of the agent. But the problem is that if we consider games with infinite durations, infinite rounds, the history may be infinite. And this will be a problem if we want to study some decision problems that needs strategies as the input. Yes?
And if the game is not transfinite, just merely infinite, why would history be infinite? And at every single time, you have only finite amendments.
So you mean like some ultimately periodicity there, right?
No, I'm just saying, I mean, from you think okay,
The whole history from the
I
beginning.
got it.
So this might be a problem. So we need some finite representation of the strategies. And to do this, we use finite state machine. It's actually a standard way to represent strategies in computational game theory or algorithmic game theory.
Najib, could I interrupt you? Could you
Yeah.
maybe switch on camera on your machine, because this is blank. Matthew, are you watching it on your computer?
Wait, now his camera's working.
Oh no. Yeah, but it's because it's his computer. If you just do it like this, people will see you from time to time,
Okay.
because you approach your machine.
All right. So we use finite state machines to represent strategies so that we can study computational problem using these inputs. Now, how do we represent strategies? So let's recall the strategies for the robots before. So this is the strategy, and we can represent the strategies using these two machines. So this one is for robot A. So Q0, the action that player robot in has to take is move to location 2. So on the next day, robot A needs to move to 2. So this corresponds to this. And then we move to Q1. And in Q1, the action to be taken is move to 1. And the same with robot B, but we have stay at 2 here. So using these two machines, we can represent these strategies, right? So formally, strategies are given by these tuples. So we have some states, and we have some transition function, internal function, that maps from the state of the agent and maybe some action of all of the other agents to the next state. And we have also action function that outputs some action to be taken by the agent. So strategy is a recipe prescribing to a player what action to take at every time step of the game. And once every player adopts a strategy, then we have what we call strategy profile. So we use sigma here. And with some strategy profile, we have an execution of the game, what we call play or path. So we use this notation pi sigma. And notice that the plays are ultimately periodic because we have deterministic finite state machines. Right? Now we have strategy profiles, and then we can define Nash equilibria. So for a given strategy profile sigma, we define the payoff function first as follows. So the payoff of agent I equals to 1 if the resulting play from the strategy profile satisfies the goal of I. Otherwise, no. So we get 1 or 0 because we have logic formula and it's either true or false. And Nash equilibrium can be defined as follows. So a strategy profile sigma is Nash equilibrium of G if for every player I and every strategy sigma I prime, which can be different from the original one that I chose in this strategy profile. The payoff for I in the original, in the sigma, is at least the payoff of I if it changes the strategy. So what it means is that no player can benefit by unilaterally changing its strategy, right? Because the original strategy profile has at least as much payoff for each player, right? Okay. Now we talk about decision problems in rational verification. The first one is E-Nash. So we are given game G and we also have temporal property phi, and we want to check whether there exists Nash equilibrium in G such that the resulting play of the strategy profile satisfies our property. So this corresponds to existential problem. And the obvious dual is A-Nash. So instead of existential, we ask for universal. So thus phi satisfied in every Nash equilibrium. Okay. And in our framework, both of these decision problems can be reduced to what we call non-emptiness. So non-emptiness essentially asks whether a given game has any Nash equilibrium at all. Because some game can possess no Nash equilibrium. Now, how do we characterize Nash equilibrium? So we characterize it by using what we call punishment strategy. So this it's derived from what is called Nash-Folk theorem. So essentially, a strategy profile sigma is Nash equilibrium of G if and only if in the path resulting from sigma it is punishing secure for every player J. So let's unpack this first. So what is this loose pi sigma here? It means that it is a set of players whose goals are not satisfied resulting from pi sigma. Right. And what does it mean by punishing secure? Punishing secure means that given agent G that is part of that is in losing set, J does not have a strategy that wins against the rest of the players. So what it means that if J wants to deviate from the original sigma, then the rest of the player can punish it. So it means that there exists no beneficial deviation, because whatever player J does, the rest of the player can punish and it will lose. And it means that the threat of punishment keeps player stick with their strategy, the original strategy. And then we have Nash equilibrium. So the problem with LTL goals is that we need memory. So we need memory to satisfy LTL goal. And it makes it difficult to reason locally. So what we do is we use parity games as a way to compute these punishment strategies. Okay. So this is what we call local reasoning. So what exactly is local reasoning? So it means that for each state S in the game, in the game arena, and for each player I can either be punished or cannot be punished, right? So this is what we usually call Markovian strategy, which is only depends on the current state.
Sorry, can I ask what is punished parameterized by? Punished is parameterized by the current strategy profile, or
Yes.
is punished with respect to, does he but a single state? So so why is the state punished? You're punished, but what are you punished with respect to in just that single state? What your action out of that state is going to be?
It's from the game arena. So in the game arena, there will be some transitions that correspond to the actions of the agents.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is so I is punishable at S if there exists some strategy by player minus I, so the rest of the player.
Yeah.
Such that for all strategy of player I always lose.
Okay, it's local with
Local with respect to the
current
state.
state. Yeah, okay.
So we do this by turning the game. So we have LTL game. We turn it into a corresponding parity game. We do this by converting each LTL goal into deterministic parity word outcome. And then we build this new game that corresponds to the original game. By doing this, we can compute the punishment strategies or punishment regions locally. And we need some assurance or some invariances that our new game, the parity game, is in some sense the same with our original game, right? Because otherwise, if there is some run that doesn't exist in the original game, then we have some problem there. So we have these two invariances. The first one is goal invariance. So if for player I and for a strategy profile sigma, if the goal of player I is satisfied in the original game, then it's also satisfied in the parity game, and vice versa. And we have also Nash equilibrium invariance, which says essentially the set of Nash equilibria in the original game is correspond exactly to the set of Nash equilibria in the game. So this is a way to visualize the characterization. So we have, so this blue blob here is the punishing region. So every player that is losing inside this area can be punished. Okay. And since since we have this punishing region, we know that if we can find some run inside this block, it is a Nash equilibrium. Because the losing players under this strategy, sigma, cannot deviate. There's no point of deviating. Right. But if the run goes outside of this punishing region, then we know that there is some state in which some player, some losing player, has some beneficial deviation. So to compute punishing region, we transform the parity game into a two-player zero-sum turn-based parity game. So essentially, what we want to find here is the existence of Nash equilibrium, the existence of punishment strategy against all strategy of the player to be punished. Yeah, is this clear? And we do this for every player, every losing player. And then we can compute the punishing region, this blue block, is the intersection of punishment region for each player, right? Because we need all of the losing players to be able to be punished. So we take the intersection. Now to solve non-emptiness, it goes as follows. So we start with some LTL game. We have some structure, some game arena, and then we have some goals of players, right? Then we transform the goals, the LTL goals, into deterministic parity word automata. And then we combine them to build this G-par. And then we compute the punishing region inside of this game, this new parity game, using the zero-sum parity games before. And then we find some run inside of this punishing region. And if there exists such run, then we know that we have Nash equilibrium. And the complexity for both specification and the agent goals expressed in LTL formula are double exponential time. It's double exponential time hard. So it's very slow. We also developed this tool to do this automatically. Let's I think we can. Okay, let's look at the maybe it's an example here, the two robot example. So it uses SRML, which is based on reactive modules language that is used by some prominent model checkers such as Prism or Mocha. So it's very, very simple. So we have module that controls some variable. We have initial comment, and we have update comment, and the goal of the player. So for instance, we have previously we have robot A and robot B. So robot A can be represented by this module array that controls A1. A1 being true means that A is at location 1. So at the beginning, we have A1 to be true. So robot A start from location 1. And then A can either stay at 1 or move to location 2 by changing the value to false. And it's the same with robot B. And then we can So it's the tool is online. You can try to play with it. Say we want to solve non-emptiness. So is the set of Nash equilibrium in the game empty or not? We can try by solving non-emptiness here. And it will return some. Yes, there exists Nash equilibria in the game. We can also check, so for eNash, for instance, we want to check whether the goal of player robot A is satisfied in some Nash equilibrium. We can do this by solving eNash and then check. So yes, the goal, the property, which is the goal of robot A, is satisfied in some Nash equilibrium. Okay, so that's if, and it's also open source. Okay, cool. So next, we talk about tractability. So double exponential time is, well, it's very slow. What can we do to improve it? So we look at different goals and properties, namely GR1, which is a fragment of LTL. And we also look at goals with games with mean-payoff goals. So the players have mean-payoff goals. So what is GR1? It's general reactivity of rank 1. It's a fragment of LTL, which with this form. So conjunction of GF of some Boolean combination of atomic proposition implies conjunction of GF Boolean combination of proposition. So for instance, we can express this kind of specification. So if request 1 happens infinitely often and request 2 happens infinitely often, then it will be acknowledged infinitely often. So, and GR1 synthesis has been around for a while, and it's been used for synthesizing controllers for like robots or drones. So it's a nice language that balance between expressibility and computational tractability. And we also have mean-payoff value. So mean-payoff value is essentially the limit infimum of some average, limit average. So suppose we have this kind of graph. The mean-payoff of staying here forever is 0. But if we move to here, so move between 0 and 1, will be 1/2, because we have 2 states here, right? And if we move here, 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 and here, so we have 1 + 2/4, so 3. So in this setting, we have 2 kinds of game. The first one is games in which the goal of the players are expressed by GR1 formula. And the other one is what we call MP game, which the goal of the player is to maximize the mean-payoff value. And we also look at eNash and the other decision problems. We have this following case. So we have GR1 games, and we have LTL specification here. We also have GR1 specification, and we have MP games with LTL and GR1 specifications. So it turns out if we have GR1 goals for the players and LTL specification, we have B-space complete problem. So actually the bottleneck is from LTL model checking, which is B-space hard. And if we both have GR1 as the goals and GR1 as the specification, we have fixed parameter tractable. which is parameterized on the number of players. So if the number of players stay fixed, we have tractable, we have polynomial algorithm. And if we have MP and LTL specification, we still have p-space complete. We have p-space bottleneck again with LTL's model checking. And if we have GR1 as the specification with MP complete. Okay, so that's for the first part. Any questions? Okay, we can move on to the second part, preparing. So we have this running example. What if we have bad equilibrium? So A stays at 1 forever, B stays at 2 forever. It's a Nash equilibrium. We can check it here. It's a Nash equilibrium. So is it possible to have a Nash equilibrium in which forever A 1 at 1 and B at 2? So then the answer is yes. So what this means that there exists some bad equilibria, right? And if we have such bad equilibria, what do? We can try to fix the game. So the question is, can we repair games with bad equilibria such that we gain some good equilibria? And we do this by redesigning the game. What do we mean by redesigning the game? Is by subsidy scheme. So now suppose we have mean-payoff game. A subsidy scheme will be a function that maps from set of agents and set of states to some real natural number. And the cost is defined as the sum of the subsidy for each player and each states. And we have subsidized games, so we have mean-payoff games, and we apply some subsidy scheme. So we obtain a new game which updated weights, which essentially just you add the subsidy to the weight of the games. So the intuition is the designer wants to incentivize players by giving some money or some giving some money to incentivize them such that the outcomes have desirable temporal specification. And we do this within some budget constraints. So the designer has some budget constraints. So the budget is not unlimited, because otherwise it will be trivial. So why do we need subsidy? Of course, there are other approaches that supposedly repair games, such as using norms. So in normative system, we can define some actions that cannot be taken at some specific situation. So basically the norm. But sometimes it's not affordable to do this. For instance, in London, for some reason, they cannot just ban cars that is not that doesn't meet minimum emission standard from traveling through London, through the ultra low emission zone. So what they do is to incentivize this, they have some daily charge. So this is like essentially the same as subsidy, but with minus, right? So it's taxation basically. And we define two kinds of problems. The first one is weak implementation. So we ask whether there exists subsidy scheme within the cost such that the game the subsidiary game solve E-Nash positively. So there exists some equilibria that satisfy our specification. And the dual will be strong implementation. So instead of E-Nash, we have A-Nash. So the intuition is very simple. Suppose we have this block again, the punishment block, and we have two lasso runs here. Both satisfy our property. But the problem is that they goes outside of the punishing region. So if we ask the E-Nash question, then the answer is no. Now, what if we can modify the perimeter of the punishment regions here, such that at least one of the lasso runs is inside of the punishment region. And then we can, to do this, we apply subsidy scheme, and then we enlarge the perimeter such that this lasso run is within the punishment region. And for strong implementation, it's similar. So suppose we have one run that doesn't satisfy our specification, then we want to make it smaller so that it goes outside. And we apply subsidy scheme. From computational complexity perspective, if we have LTS specification, we still have p-space bottleneck here. But if we have tier 1 specification, weak implementation can be solved in NP complete, and strong implementation can be solved in sigma P2 complete.
So what is sigma P2 complete?
It's the second level of polynomial hierarchy. So it corresponds to the axis for all. Right. So to conclude, I talk about an approach to multi-agent system correctness, and we have some decision problems and some intuition to how to solve them. And we also went through a quest for tractable cases. And also we talked about dealing with bad equilibria by preparing game. There are many possible challenges and future directions. For instance, what if, so previously we only have deterministic games, deterministic systems. So what if we have probabilistic systems? So this corresponds to stochastic games. And it obviously will make our decision problems harder, right? Or maybe even undecidable. There are some work looking at this direction. The most prominent work is Prism. So they have this new Prism games 3.0, which computes approximate Nash equilibrium. So it's not exact Nash equilibrium, but just approximate. Because what they do, they're purchased by value iteration. So it somehow cannot sometimes it can return Nash equilibrium with some epsilon value. Another avenue is to link rational verification with multi-agent reinforcement learning. So if we have stochastic games or Markov games, then obviously there is some connection with multi-agent reinforcement learning. So in one of the future big challenge is how can we verify multi-agents reinforcement? Another one is obviously scalability, because double exponential time will not fly in the real world. Maybe we can look at some symbolic methods, some abstraction methods, or maybe even statistical methods. You know, there are some advances in statistical model checking, using randomized or random sampling to answer some question within some acceptable bounds. So maybe we can use similar kind of methods for rational verification. And the next one is from synthesis to planning. So with if we have synthesized strategy, right? We have finite state machines that corresponds to the witness of some mass equilibrium. And how can we translate that witness into some plans or some robots? Yes. And the other one is, so a while ago I attended Moshe Party's talk virtually, not in person. And during his talk, he paraphrased Daniel Kahneman, the thinking fast and slow guy. So he said that, Moshe said that machine learning can be looked as fast thinking, right? So for instance, with autonomous car, the vision system is implemented by some neural nets, and it will recognize some stop sign. So given some vision, is there any stop sign there? Or, you know? And it usually does this very fast. And the second part is the slow thinking, which is the logic part. The question is, if the vision recognizes some stop sign, do we need to stop at this stop sign? So there's some symbolic reasoning behind it, right? And usually symbolic reasoning is slower. So the grand challenge is, how do we combine logic, slow thinking, with fast thinking, which is machine learning? And this corresponds to the question like, should we trust an autonomous car to act safely at a stop sign? Right? To answer this question, we need to encompass both the fast thinking, the machine learning, the vision, the neural nets, and the slow thinking, the logic. So is the plan, is it safe to stop here, or is it better to stop here or not? And recently there's this tweet that I saw from Jakob Forster. So apparently Tesla realized that self-driving is multi-agent problems. And Jakob once tried to explain to Elon Musk that this will be, once we have computer vision solved, this will be the next frontier. But at that time, he said that supervised learning is solving it. Now then, if Tesla already realized this, is the next path will be neurosymbolic multi-agent systems. So that will be a really interesting direction too. Thank you very much, and I would like to acknowledge my collaborators, Julian, Giuseppe, and Mike. Thank you. If there's any questions, feel free to.
If I could ask a question.
Yes, sure.
Well, first, thanks for a really interesting talk. So my question is more to make sure I fully understood the approach. So at the beginning, you talked about rational behavior. So that's adhering to your goals.
Mhm.
And one way you could think of, everyone has good goals. They want to survive and get through the
Mhm.
traffic network. But does it equally work if you throw in sort of antisocial driver? So their goals will be misaligned with the other natural goals, but you could verify that the strategies are robust enough to make allowances for the rogue driver. and their
Mhm.
strategy. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we need to repair the game then.
You have to repair the node, right?
Yeah,
By-
by
yeah.
by add some tax or punishment, some fines or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, it's possible to have agents that goals are dangerous. And
Or ban that type of vehicle from the road.
yes, yeah.
I'm not going to say it here. Hey, thanks.
So just like a little comment. It's like whenever you sit down, so we had the existential problem that is E-Nash and A-Nash. And I have this tendency to first think like, yeah, it's enough to just check A-Nash is better, but it's not, right? If there is no equilibrium, A-Nash is satisfied, but E-Nash isn't. There's some kind of we hit that in any kind of interesting case.
Usually for ANASH, we think about it as some kind of safety guarantee. We don't want to have some equilibria that satisfies some bad.
Okay.
So if there's no equilibria, then the bad property is.
Okay. What happened? We're into this another meeting. Thanks again.
What happens in the absence of perfect information? I mean, is there any work in this area? Because I mean, my PhD was on routing protocols, which is in theory an example of a multi-agent system with goals and preferences, and you have to work out whether there is a stable equilibrium. But in that, you don't get any information when some ISP the other side of the world decides to defect and route all your traffic internally through their network. Then you don't get that information immediately, so you don't have you can't start computing punishment strategies.
Yes. So in general, with imperfect information, it's undecidable.
It's undecidable. Okay.
But there is some cases that are still decidable. For instance, I think if you have some kind of like hierarchical knowledge.
That's really interesting because that's exactly what's the case in exactly what the routing community has decided that actually because if the internet only works because it's hierarchical, it's ordered hierarchically up and down.
Yeah.
Answers.
I think there's some theoretical works results that look at this hierarchical kind of system, and it was proven that it's still decidable with this kind of.
Do you have any links and papers? Afterwards, maybe.
Yes, I can.
References you can send.
I can show you. I cannot recall from the top of my head.
Yes, I was wondering, is it ever a problem that you deal with finite state automata, not something more complicated in terms of solving problems?
Sorry.
Well, so you have to give a finite state automata for each of your actors, right?
Strategies.
Yeah, because you need something infinite and to describe that in a finite way.
Mhm.
But finite state automata are still pretty powerless.
Yes. Powerless or powerful?
Powerless compared to the Turing hierarchy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So have you ever encountered a situation where you say, well, actually a finite state automata is not sufficient, I need something more than a finite state automata. And what is it then? Is that are you going to concept free languages, or is it something, or is it some ad hoc add-on that you need?
Yes. So
On counter automaton?
in our framework with LTL, with LTL goals, finite state automata is solving them. So there's no problem that cannot be solved with finite state automata. But if you look into other kinds of goals that might be possible, that you need something more expressive. I know there are some works that essentially have some, we have strategies with push-down automata, for instance. I think there are
That's concept free language.
yes. So there are works on that as well. I think it's still decidable, but it's like 3 XP time at this, or maybe non-elementary or something.
And that leads me to my second question. So, I mean, these are all worst case
Yes.
I guess, right? So
Yes.
is there anything known about average case or because maybe it doesn't occur very often? I mean, we sometimes,
yeah.
I use sometimes inference algorithms that I know are very bad in worst case, but in practice, we never hit the worst case anywhere. Everything is basically linear.
Yes, yes.
Do you know anything about that? Practically?
I'm not sure that there people already, maybe people are looking, but I don't have anything.
It suggests that people are not really using this.
Sorry?
It suggests that these people aren't really using this.
Maybe not now, not yet. Maybe.
So the question is, how big do the examples scale before? What's a big example if you've run through each?
So the problem is, so we have, it's possible with like small games, but with some complicated LTL goals, we have really big parity games. I think at some point we had an experiment, tens of thousands of states for parity games, and then after that it was because we have double exponential kind of blow up, right? After that it's just.
So how many states and agents in that corresponding states in the original? Well, approximately agents in that corresponding to.
Tens, hundreds of thousands.
No, maybe tens. The problem is the exponential, the worst exponential blow will be translating from LTL go formula to RTL formula. Because that's the double exponential blow. So if you have like really simple game arena, but with very, very complex LTL goals, then you might have like really big parity game. So that's why we have GR1, which is it has really simple model checking and synthesis complexity, and we have this lower, much lower computational complexity.
One thing I didn't entirely get in that regard is, can all LTL models can be translated into GR1, or do you have to?
No.
Okay, so you have to rewrite.
GR1 is a strict subset of LTL.
Okay.
So there are some expression that you cannot express with GR1.
Okay.
It does better because the reduction from LTL to GR1 is quite significant.
Yeah.
I mean, so I can also imagine there's something in between.
Yes, maybe.
I mean, you see it more often, like you have second order logic, they go to monadic second order logic, that gives you, you go from very bad to manageable.
Yes.
So this is what I mean, this is just one or two two extremes, maybe, but
Yeah, there's.
do you know if people looked in between, whether there's anything, what remains scalable, how can I stay in there? Because it's something like NP complete, was that the worst one? For GR, FPT.
I think there are some people that looks at different kinds of fragments of LTL, like using only G's or using only R's. But yeah, there's no nice summary of like between these two.
But LTL is really old, right? We expect people to investigate its subsets of LTL too.
I'm sure there are people that investigate. So rational verification. So the problem of non-emptiness in rational verification is interdisciplinar to LTL synthesis. So I'm sure there are people that look at some fragments of LTL, the synthesis of some fragment of LTL. So yeah, must be there's something like in between, but we don't really have. For now, we don't really have like nice summary of like what the classes between. So maybe it's nice to have something like polynomial hierarchy kind of type.
Are there any questions online?
No, I'm checking.
No, okay.
So, thanks.
I think we're over time anyway, but it was a great talk. Thanks a lot, Najib.
Thank you very much.